In this video, I'm going to show you step by step on how to create a sprinkler family in Revit. Let's go. Alright, so the first step is to create a new family. So let's click on new. In our case, let's go with metric generic model face based. Alright, so the very first step is to change the category. So let's go to family category and parameters. And let's search for sprinkler from this list. So if you do not find it, generally you would need to switch on these categories here, the filter list first, and then select the right category. So in our case, it is sprinklers. And let's click on OK. Now the very first step is to create our reference planes and our dimensions to make it parametric. So let's make it parametric in the front view. So let's go to the front view. So this element here, what you see can be considered as the ceiling or maybe a floor. So this is where you're going to place your sprinkler, and generally the sprinkler will be facing outside. So we'll need to project it outside in this area here. So let's start by creating some of the reference planes. And also before I create the reference planes, I would like to change the color of these reference planes so that I know what is existing and what is new. So to change the color of the reference planes, just go to Manage. Click on Object Styles, and here you find Annotation Objects. So here you have only one reference plane category. Let's create a new category and call this Reference Plane New. And for this category, I would give maybe red color and also change the line pattern. So this way, when I create a new reference plane, RP is the shortcut to create a reference plane, or you can click here as well. I'm going to select the subcategory first, reference plane new, and then create my reference plane lines. So we're going to be using the revolve command, and this is our axis line here. And we'll also need the projection from the floor here. So I'm going to create another reference plane on top and another reference plane here. So let's first create the dimensions for these reference planes and then create the rest. So I'm going to activate my dimension tool, DE. So this align dimension tool, and let's always click from the strong reference plane to the weaker reference planes. Alright, so then let me create a reference plane here as well at the bottom. So this would be our offset from the ceiling. So let's create dimension from here to here, and let's also make this a parameter. So to make it a parameter, simply select the dimension and click on create parameter here and call this offset. Let's also make this a instance parameter so that we can adjust each sprinkler individually in our project. Let's also create some parameters for these dimensions here. So let's select this dimension here and click on create parameter here. And let's call this the orifice radius, and let's leave it as a type parameter. Let's select this dimension now and let's call this the nominal radius. Perfect. So now we'll need to create some dimensions from here to here as well. So this would be the total depth or height of our sprinkler. So let's select this dimension here and let's call this the height. I would actually like to make the height an instance parameter. So in case you made it a type parameter and you would like to change it to an instance, there's always this box here which you can switch on. So now it's an instance parameter. Perfect. Now this is our head height. So let's create a dimension from here to here and let's call this the head height. Alright, so I've made most of it parametric, but the size is a bit too big. For example, we do not have sprinklers which are 1000 millimeter in dia. So let's adjust some of these dimensions first before we go further. So let's go to our family types here. Now generally the head height would be about 35 mm. The total height would be about say 60 mm. The nominal radius could be maybe about 5 mm. The offset can be about another 35 mm, or depending, it can be 0 as well. So let's leave it with some value for now. And the orifice radius would be, let's say, about 15 mm. So this is a more reasonable and practical choice for a sprinkler. So now I can copy this reference plane down by 1 millimeter. And this reference plane here up by 1 meter as well. And we need to always make sure these dimensions or these reference planes stay in the same position. So let's create a dimension from top to down. And let's lock it similarly here as well, so that it always stays at 1 millimeter. Perfect. I feel the head height is a bit too much, so let's change this to maybe 10. 10 seems more reasonable. Alright, perfect. So now let's use the revolve tool and let's create our revolve here. So let's go to create, click on revolve. The first set of lines is the boundary line, or the lines you want to revolve around an axis. So let's start our lines from here and go all the way till here. You can also tap SI, which is the shortcut to find this intersection. And then I'm going to go till this point, go back on top and finish here. Now generally this line I would like to snap, so I can use the pick lines option. Make sure to lock it and lock it with this line here. Similarly here as well. I had an extra line, so let's delete that extra line. And simply towards the end, you would need to trim these. Alright, perfect. And now let's select the axis line. So the axis line needs to be this axis here, and make sure to lock it as well. Then you can finish. So we've created our sprinkler head. Now let's create an extrusion and make it go all the way up till our reference plane here. So to create the extrusion, I can create this in the reference plane, and the floor plan that is. And let's go to create, click on extrusion, click on circle this time. And I'm going to click on this point here and simply click outside. Now I'd always like to snap my circle to these reference planes here. So I'll select the circle, make sure the center mark visible option is on. And then I'm going to align it to these reference planes here. Alright, perfect. Now to make it parametric, you can switch on this temporary dimension so that it makes it permanent. And then simply change this to your nominal radius. Perfect. And then you can click on finish edit mode. Now it's always important to always snap it in the front view as well. So let's snap it all the way to the top reference plane here and lock it there. And this point here, I would lock it with our offset. Alright, so now we have sort of a parametric sprinkler family. So if I go to my 3D view here, you can see the small sprinkler family here. And I can also create two types to make it flexible. So it always helps to create two types and change the values for type 2. So for example, you can change the head height to 5, height maybe to 15, height maybe 75, nominal radius maybe 7. Offset from floor can be 0 and orifice radius can be about 20. So now if I click on apply, it should change automatically. And we have two types with different dimensions. Alright, perfect. So it works perfectly as a parametric object. But I would also like to add some extra parameters here to make it more intelligible. For example, when I switch on recessed, then it would be sitting inside our ceiling, and when the recessed is off, then it could be sitting outside with an offset. And we also need an extra reference plane at the bottom. But before I create that, let me just create the if-else statements first, and then you would understand better why you would need an extra reference plane at the bottom. Alright, so now let's go to our family types here. So we already have some existing parameters. Let's create some new parameters. So let's click on new and let's call this recessed. Make sure that the data type is yes, no parameter, and make sure it's an instance parameter so that you can switch it on or off for each instance. Now I'd also like to group it on top. So I would change the group to constraints. So it stays on top of my list. Perfect. So now when I switch this on, I want the offset to be 0 and the height to be 0 as well. Alright, so let's start with the offset. So this is our offset, default is set at 35. So here you can add an if-else statement. So for example, if I type if bracket or open brackets, and if it is recessed, so just type in recessed, then it would be 0. Otherwise, you can give an offset of, say, for example, 50. So now if I switch this off, the offset is 50. And if I switch this on, the offset is 0. I'll show it to you guys also here. All right, so now you can see that the offset is 0. And if I switch this back on, then the offset is 50. But I would also like to control my offset. So I'll create a new parameter and call this offset actual and make it an instance parameter as well. And let's change the offset actual to say 100. And instead of 50 mm here, I would actually write offset actual so that I can control the offset. So now you can see the offset is 100, and I can also change the offset here. And it automatically change here as well. Let's do the same now for our height as well. The height needs to be 0. So if I switch on recessed, then yeah, the offset is 0, but there is a height for the sprinkler. But generally the height needs to go down, right? So that is so we'll need to create an extra parameter called depth and fix our extrusion with the depth reference plane. So I'm going to create a reference plane here, the bottom. And let me switch on our offset again so that you guys understand that better. So right now the height goes all the way till here. And the problem is when I switch on recessed, there is no offset, but there is a height for the sprinkler. Ideally, I would like it to be sitting inside, right? So I can remove the constraint from here and snap it to this reference plane at the bottom. And then this reference plane would be our depth. And it also has to be an instance parameter. Perfect. So now I can add an if-else statement here as well. So let's add if-else statement next to height. So if it is recessed, then it would be 0. Otherwise, the height can be a standard dimension of say 75. So now I'll show you how this works. So now, for example, if I change it to type 2, then it would be sitting right inside. Okay, that's a problem. It has to sit a bit outside. So we'll need to change the formula a bit more. So we'll also need to add the head height into this formula. So let's go to our formula list here for height, and let's make sure that 0 plus head height is added. So it always stays 15 millimeters above our ceiling. Perfect. So now it is a perfect parametric sprinkler family. So you can see here, this is recessed. And if I switch this off, it stays out. Now let's add this into our project. We can first save the family. All right, so I've given my name and I'm going to save it here. Now let's open our project and load this family into our project. I'm going to go to my ceiling plans and I'm going to place my family here. So to place your family, first we'll need to load this into our project. So let's click on load into project and I brought it in. And now I can either place on vertical plane or place on face. So let me place on face and place it on this ceiling here. And you can see that I've brought it in. Perfect. I'll show it to you guys in a section as well. So here's our family and you have a recess parameter as well. So if you switch that on, it stays recessed. Now, of course, the offset is a bit too much, so you can change the offset here as well. So now the problem is I cannot see the sprinkler and I would need a symbol for the sprinkler. So let's create a symbol and add it to the sprinkler family. So I'm going to go back to our family list. So to add a symbol, you can either create it here in the reference plane here. Under annotate, we have filled region. So you can either use fill region or I would highly recommend that you create a separate symbol family. So let's go to file, click on new and click on family. And let's go to annotations and let's select metric generic annotation. So I'm going to load this family into my main family. So I can leave the category. So we have actually different categories here. I would leave it under generic annotations. And I will show you how to also add tags later. So for now, let's leave it under generic annotations. Perfect. So now let's create our symbol. So let's go to create and let's click on fill region. Make sure to select circle and let's create our circle from this point. Now you can also make the circle parametric, but I would not make it a radius. Rather, I would go to create and click on diameter and add the diameter dimension inside. Select this dimension and let's create a parameter for this dimension. So let's call this symbol dia. Perfect. And we'll also like to change the type here. So let's click on edit type. So right now it is black. Always duplicate your types first before changing the colors or the settings here. And let's click on black here and change it to red. Let's click on finish edit mode. So now we have our red symbol. Let's load this into our main family. So before we load it, we need to also save this family. So I'm going to call this MPS. Sprinkler symbol. Perfect. Now let's load this into our main family, which is MPS sprinkler or not, and not a project. And to place this, let's go to annotate and click on symbol here, and you can simply place it in the middle. Alright, so this is our symbol and it generally stays in the center. Now if you want to place it in the center and snap it, you can also align it. So you can use the align tool and snap it with these reference planes here so that it always stays in the center of our family. Perfect. Now if you'd like to adjust the radius in the project as well for the symbol. So for example, if I select the symbol, click on edit type, there's an option to associate a family parameter. So right now we do not have the symbol dia family parameter. So let's create a symbol dia family parameter. If you want, you can make it an instance, but in this case, I guess type makes more sense so that you can change it universally together. And let's click on OK. All right, perfect. So now if I load this into our project, you can notice that our symbol comes in. But I would actually like to change the symbol in every view here. So let me switch on my temporary view properties. So for example, if I change it to coarse, then I like to only see my symbol and not my 3D element. Similarly, if I change to medium or fine, I would only like to see my 3D element and not my symbol. So to adjust that, what you can do is just go to your family, select the symbol and click on visibility settings here. And make sure to switch off, for example, maybe medium and fine. What I would also like to do is select my 3D object and change the visibility settings for my 3D object. The 3D object I would like to only see in medium and fine. So now if I load this back into my project and overwrite the existing version. So now you can notice that when I use medium or fine, I only see my 3D element. And when I switch to coarse, I only see my symbol. I guess I would also need to make my extrusion part of the, change the visibility parameter for the extrusion as well. So if I switch to wireframe, select this extrusion. And yeah, make sure to switch that off in coarse view. All right, perfect. So the last step is to, of course, add the coverage circle as well, so that you would know how much of the space this sprinkler would affect. So let's go to annotate, click on symbolic line, and let's use the circle option here. Make sure to place it in the center here. So if you would like to switch off your symbol family, you can also add a visibility parameter, but for now I would simply just temporarily hide it. So let's go to annotate, click on symbolic line, select circle, and make sure to place it here and give sort of a radius here. I'd also like to change this to dash lines. So let me see if there is an option for dash lines. So there is no subcategory for dash lines. So let's quickly create a subcategory for dash lines under manage object styles. Here's our sprinkler. Let's create a new subcategory called coverage line. Let's change this to maybe red. And let's change the line pattern to aligning line. Perfect. And to change this here, select the circle and change this to coverage line. Perfect. Let's make this parametric as well. So I would like to use again the diameter dimension. Select this dimension and let's make this parametric. So let's call this the coverage dia. And let's leave this as a type parameter, because generally for each size of a sprinkler we have a fixed coverage size. All right, perfect. So now let's load this into our project. Overwrite the existing version. And now we have our coverage radius. Now, of course, this is a bit too small, so we'll need to add the right size here. Generally, for small sprinklers, we can give a coverage size of 3658 mm or about 12 feet. All right, that makes more sense, right? Now, the last step is to, of course, add our pipe connector so that we can add this piping to our sprinkler. So let's go back to our family here and let's go to our 3D view. So I'm going to add a piping here at the bottom, piping connector. So let's go to create, click on pipe connector here and let's place it at the bottom. Perfect. Now let's select this. So now you can see this is our dia. We can change the dia to something more reasonable. So let's say 20 mm. So let's select our connector. Let's assign a new parameter. So let's create a new parameter. Let's call this nominal dia and let's leave it as a type parameter. And let's go back to our family types and make sure that our nominal dia is 2 times our nominal radius. So you can see that our nominal dia now is 14. Perfect. Now the last step is to also change some of these parameters here. So the system classification can be fire protection wet. The flow configuration can be either be preset or system. Yeah, the flow direction can be in. The loss method can be with a specific loss. The flow can be about 3. And the pressure drop can be about 96,500 Pascal. Now, if you'd like to adjust this for each type, say for example, you have a small, a medium and a large sprinkler, then you would need to associate a family parameter. So let's call this flow here. And let's call this the pressure drop. All right, so now the last step would be to create some types here. So let's go to family types. And let's go to type 1. Now, when you use the sprinkler category, you also have some additional parameters here. For example, orifice size, temperature rating, K factor, and so on. So let's change the orifice size here. Say, for example, this first one can be 12.7 mm dia. The temperature rating can be about 57 degrees. So which means that once it reaches 57 degrees, then the fire sprinkler system would get activated. Now, I'm going to consider this type 1 as the smaller sprinkler. So I can also rename this type 1. So let's call this small sprinkler. For small sprinklers, the K factor is generally about 80. So the K factor is generally a numerical value that represents the flow rate in relation to the pressure supplied. So higher K factor indicates a higher flow rate. So in this case, we could keep a lower flow rate. So that's why I've given a lower value. The pressure class, you can set it here, either standard, which can be about 7 to 20 psi. So it categorizes the sprinklers based on water pressure they are designed to handle. So higher pressure are often used in systems requiring longer piping or higher flows. So you can use higher pressure for maybe a larger sprinkler. In our case, the orifice, of course, small. So this is the orifice size and it is a smaller orifice. So the orifice dia is what you see here. That is our orifice dia. The coverage in this case could be standard as well. So that would be about 12 feet by 12 feet or 3.65 meter by 3.65 meter. And the response could be standard. Here we have our flow rate as well. So in this case, the flow rate can be about 1.5. So now since I've associated that parameter, I can change it here. And the pressure drop can be about 50,000 Pascal, which is about 7 psi. So we already have type 2 here. So let me just rename this. Call this standard sprinkler. And I'm going to adjust the values. Now, if you'd like access to these different values and also a guide on more about sprinklers, head to the link in the description and you can download this guide and also this family. Alright, so I've changed some of the values here. Now the only problem I have now is I would like to associate the orifice size with our nominal radius here. So I would like the nominal radius to be half of the orifice size. So I'm going to simply type in here orifice size divided by 2. So that way it always stays as half of our orifice size and it is reading from this parameter here. Perfect. So now we have a complete parametric sprinkler and we have 3 types as well. Now in this case, I would need to adjust the size of our height here. So the depth can be about 50 and and the height here, which is the head height. If you'd like to adjust the height as well, we'll create a new height here. So let's create a new parameter called this height actual so that you can actually adjust the height. So let's say the height is 50 and instead of adding a definite value, let's change this to height actual. So that way you can adjust the height as well. Perfect. So the small sprinklers can be recessed. Yeah, the other ones can stay out. All right, perfect. And I would also need to adjust the coverage dia here, which I forgot. So I'm just going to change this for each type. All right, perfect. So now let's load this into our project. Let's overwrite the existing version on and its parameter values because we changed the parameter values in our family. And now if I copy this, so generally sprinklers are placed about 15 feet between each other and about half the size, so maybe 7.5 feet from the walls. So 15 feet is about 4.5 meters. So of course that is wrong because this project is in millimeters. So let's type in 4,500. All right, perfect. So now let's see how this looks in our section as well. So let's go to our section and let's change to fine. All right, so here you can see our sprinkler here. Perfect. And we have different types as well. So we have small sprinkler, which is supposed to be recessed. Or you can switch that on for each as well. And we also have our large sprinkler. And we can also switch, for example, you can change the work plane here. And then you can change, say, for example, the depth to 0. And you can give an offset from the work plane, let's say 150. So I have a small problem here. The problem is if I give an offset, let's say 300, I would like it to have an offset and not be extended from the ceiling to the top. So let's go to our family and fix this. Let's go to the front view. So if you need to solve this, then we would need to create another extrusion just for the depth and add a visibility parameter. So for example, if I can actually remove this constraint and select it here. So remove constraint and lock it with this reference plane here. And then I'll add a new extrusion now. So let's go to our reference plane, our flow plan. I can temporarily hide all of this. And let's create a new extrusion. Let's create a circle this time. So from here, for example, and let's go out. Let's also make sure to lock it. So let's switch on our center mark visible and lock it here. Make this dimension permanent and let's assign the right dimension. In this case, it would be nominal radius. Perfect. And then simply go to your front view and make sure to lock this with the bottom reference plane and the top reference plane here. Now this element here, I would like to hide it when it is not recessed. So let's associate a family parameter here so that we have a visible option here, and let's associate this to recessed. Alright, so now we have two extrusions. Now only when the object is recessed, for example, type 1 is recessed, then, okay, let me change the dimension so that you guys see this better. Then it would sit flush with the ceiling. And when it is not recessed, for example, if I go back and use standard sprinkler, then it would stay up and this element would get hidden automatically. Now you don't see it, but you would see it better in the project. So let's go to load project. Let's overwrite the existing version and its parameter values. So we have an error here. It says an error occurred in family and was automatically resolved, but may require review by the family creator. So the extrusion is too thin. So let's check where this problem is in our family. So let's go to manage, click on select by ID. And let's click on show the following. Yeah, okay. So the problem is in type 3. So you can see that the problem is in type 3, which is large sprinkler. So let's quickly see what the settings are for type 3. Now under family types. All right, so the nominal dia is right. Yeah, type 3, right? Yeah, you can notice that the offset actual is set to 0. Let's keep it to 50. And let's click on apply here. Okay, and let's switch off recessed. Okay, so we have a problem here when we switch off recessed. So what is the problem? Yeah, the height actually is set to 0. So let's maybe give an height as well. All right, perfect. So now it should work. So let me just load this back into our project. Overwrite the existing version. And there are no issues. So now it's a perfect family. I'll show it to you guys how it is in the section as well. So right now I gave an offset. And so of course you can keep it recessed or keep it off. And you can switch off the offset here. So generally you can switch off the offset and it's 0. Or you can flip it and give an offset. Let's say, for example, 200. Then you have an exact offset of 200 from the base. So now it's a perfect family. You can also start creating the pipes. So for example, if you right click here, you can click on draw pipe and you can go down. Yeah, so generally you have this error if we do not have the right dia for our sprinkler. For example, if I select this pipe here, the dia is 32 mm. But for our element here, the orifice size is 25.4 mm. So we would need to add a new dimension into our settings. Let's go to systems. So let's add the dimension in our mechanical settings. And so if you go to segments and sizes under pipe settings, you would find Kupferdin. So this is the pipe which we're using. And we need to add a new dimension. So let's add a new dimension. Let's call the nominal diameter 25.4. And then we have an inner lining and outer lining. So we can give this, let's say 24 or 25, and let's say this as 26. So I bought this in, so now I should be able to use it. So if you check the size for the large sprinkler, the orifice size is 25.4 mm. So let me just delete these pipes. And now if I right click on draw pipe, I should not have this problem. And it automatically creates the sprinkler as well. All right, so I hope you liked this video and you learned how to create a sprinkler family. Now, if you'd like to download this family and save time, you can head to the link in the description and you can buy it for a reasonable price. I've also added additional guides, for example, what each of the parameters here mean, and also more about the fire system in a building. I will eventually be creating a course as well. So if you like more updates and more, you can go head to the link in the description. I hope you found this video useful. Please do subscribe for more such videos and I'll see you guys in the future video. Cheers.